Welcome to the Redevelopment Commission meeting for the city of Bloomington for May 31st, 2022. We'll start the meeting with a roll call.
Sorry. Ladies first, always.
Deb Hodgman here.
Randy Cassidy here.
Deborah Meyerson here.
Martha Street here.
Thank you. And staff present, please.
Christina Finley.
Is anybody's volume? All the volumes on your laptops.
Got it turned off. Just make sure.
Right. Somebody wanted.
Yeah, no audio.
Jeff Underwood here as well.
All right, Jeff, thanks.
Larry Allen Legal, I'm here.
Rick Dietz, ITS department.
Alex Crowley, Economic Sustainable Development.
Al, you hear John?
Yeah, John Severingham, I said it and it kind of went into the echo.
Okay, thanks. I was trying to remember. Sure, if you're not. Great, well, thank you. Let's see, next on the agenda is the minutes for,
No minutes for this meeting,
oh,
Madam President. Yeah. So this is a special meeting of the RDC, and for that reason, we'll have the minutes and everything for the next one. So there's no payroll registers, no claims registers.
Okay.
We just go straight into the business.
nice and clean. Thank
Straight
you.
out of Acting President.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification on both fronts. Okay, well, let's go to resolution 22-20-33, declaring an area in Bloomington as an economic development area, designating such area as an allocation area and approving an economic development plan for said area. Who would like to speak to this?
I could start with a presentation and then any of my colleagues would be welcome to join in, anyone who's here in person or remotely. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. There's a thing in front of my screen. I will just leave it at this. Thank you for hearing our request for establishment of a TIF district to benefit the city and Meridian's project. Go through an overview of this project. We shared a little bit of that at our earlier work session. We'll go through that again for the benefit of all the members. Tell you a little bit about Meridian and the project, and then also about the specific TIF request. So first off, Meridian's requested and the city supports the creation of an allocation area to cover business personal property of Meridian as they install their fiber infrastructure and network equipment throughout the city. Meridian plans to invest more than $50 million in building the network, as well as establishing an office, hiring staff, and other activities that will contribute to our community and economy. The taxes collected within the TIF would be rebated to the city by Meridian, or by Meridian to the city, and this is desired to facilitate the build and to achieve the overall objectives of Meridian and the city in this project. Meridian is an international public infrastructure developer. They're based in France. Their US headquarters is in New York City. Interestingly, and something that sets them apart from any of the other providers that we have worked with, they are a benefit corporation, which means that they are dedicated not just to being a sustainable and profitable business, but they also have other elements that they are responsible to their board and their charter for, including environmental, social, and corporate governance goals. They are also members, signatories to UN sustainable development goals as well. And we find them to be a uniquely good fit for Bloomington's fiber goals, our digital equity strategic goals, and to our community's values. So why are we here? We have sought for quite some time, going back to 2016, and even before that, to secure a partner to ensure that Bloomington residents and businesses have ubiquitous and affordable high-speed fiber connectivity. The purpose of this is to secure the benefits of modern technology for all in our community, which includes education, healthcare, employment, entertainment, personal engagement, and more, everything that the modern internet affords our residents. We want to enhance our competitiveness in the marketplace and as a leading innovative community. So our goals going back to even before 2016 that Mayor Hamilton articulated is he was seeking a network partner that would provide community-wide support so that no one was left behind. The network would reach as close to everyone as we possibly could, that there were community benefits to this project, not just a new ISP, but one that engaged with us so that there is a feedback mechanism and it's a partnership where we can both achieve our objectives, that the network operates in a sustainable way, that it's a business that will be an ongoing concern in the decades, not simply a provider that comes into our community, is bought up, changes their business direction, sells out, and leaves us with whatever they leave us with. And then one of our last, but also very important goal for us is bridging the digital divide. So this infrastructure project should not just provide high-speed fiber bandwidth to everyone, but we want to ensure that it elevates those who are most in need and who are most left out from our current broadband environment. So here's a super condensed backstory. As I mentioned, 2016 is really when we started this overall project. We released a request for information. There were multiple responses to that we ultimately whittled down to one party whom we negotiated with very intensely. That project was quite promising. We had an announcement, but it ultimately faltered when Axia was purchased by a larger company and essentially pulled out of multiple cities that they were in negotiations with in the U.S. market. We've had a number of other parties that we've had discussions with, including Metronet. They were also secured by or partnered with another larger firm and changed their community target demographics, which made it challenging for us to continue that discussion. They looked elsewhere. And then we've had a number of discussions with our local incumbent providers as part of the RFI process, but continuing through. And then, of course, COVID-19 arrived in 2020, and we realized that the things that we had been talking about all the way back in 2016 were incredibly important, and we still weren't where we needed to be. In 2020, we conducted a survey and drafted a digital equity strategic plan, which we released at the end of the year in 2020, which has helped guide elements of this work. And then in 2020, we connected somewhat by chance with Wired, an ISP who found our community interesting. They were, like our other parties, bought by another company, a large investment firm, and also pivoted in their markets. But thankfully, as part of this overall story, there were strong business connections in Wired with staff at Meridian, and they, in consultation with us, provided the materials that they had generated from their site surveys. And then we kicked off this process intensely with Meridian after that. And since then, we have been working intensely, earnestly to bring this project, to fruition. We signed a letter of intent with Meridian in August 27th. And then from then to this day, we've been working on a master agreement, the proposed digital equity initiative. We have inventoried our conduit assets. There have been multiple site visits and discussions and visitations. And we are to the point that we are right now, where we are at the culmination of this process. And as part of that, we are seeking a establishment of a TIF district that would allow this project and all of the benefits that it promises to move forward. Among those benefits are Meridian proposes to build a gigabit speed fiber optic network that will provide at an investment in our community of over $50 million of new resources brought into our community. It will be an open access network, which means that Meridian is an infrastructure provider. They're not an ISP, which means that they have a ISP partner that they will bring into the market. And then after an agreed upon time period, the network as a wholesale offering will be available to other providers to use, not just that initial provider. That's a very compelling model to us. And we think that adds an even stronger element will add an even stronger element of competition in our local environment. In addition, Meridian is proposing 85% and up community coverage. That is the baseline. We expect to go higher than that, but at least 85%. That stands in contrast to other providers which have no requirement on them to provide coverage. They may, but this is a compelling agreement to us. The cost of the ISP service will be competitive. It's a competitive market, and they intend to compete. And then we have a very robust digital equity initiative, which is part of this proposal and has been something that we've worked on intensely since the beginning of our conversations. That digital equity initiative will include 250 megabit per service up and down to all income eligible households within the community. Eligibility is tied to SNAP, TANF, the Indiana Department of Education's free and reduced meal service, and the Social Security OASDI benefits, which means we will not be administering the eligibility. Eligibility will be based on whether any individual is already proven eligibility to those programs, thus streamlining access to this service. And lastly, this will be a service that is offered essentially for free. There's a $30 per month charge, which can be offset with the federal government's Affordable Connectivity Program. which has been around in a number of different forms, but it was recently rebranded. And that would provide what we believe and others who we work with closely to be the most compelling digital equity offering of any community in the US. We'd be happy to find information to the contrary about that, because it all benefits residents. We aren't in competition with other cities by any means, but we think this is a really important way to elevate everyone in our community through next generation infrastructure and a very creative partnership. Other elements of the project that we think are important: it's a commitment to network neutrality. We have protection of the city's interests through a voice at the table as the infrastructure is being built out, and a review process in the event that Meridian determines they want to sell the asset. That being said, to date, they have not ever sold an asset, but we wanted to ensure that we had some protection if that happened, because we've been close to a deal in the past. We want to make sure this is something that sticks and works for everybody in our community for decades to come. There is a regional impact to this project. This isn't part of the purview of the RDC and what you're considering today, but as part of this effort, we essentially brought other communities to the table: Columbus, Shelbyville, and Martinsville. In our early discussions with Meridian, we looked at the Bloomington project. It seemed like something we were interested in pursuing, but they have a perspective that goes beyond Bloomington, and they were looking to other opportunities. There are similarly situated cities, Columbus, Martinsville, and Shelbyville, who are surprisingly similar in their provider environment and a number of other things. And it was just natural to include them, and we're happy to be able to do so. The build, provided that we are able to move forward at this meeting and in the forthcoming meetings that we have with the Plan Commission, and the council, we intend to start the build this year, and it will conclude within 3 years and possibly less, depending on a number of factors. So that brings us to the reason why we're here today, visiting with you, the TIF district request. We're moving forward with a public tax increment finance project through the Redevelopment Commission, Plan Commission, and the City Council. And then there's a number of steps that comes back to the RDC at the end of that. Meridian's requested again, and the city supports creation of this allocation area to cover the business personal property of Meridian as they install the fiber network. This kind of TIF, as you might have heard from some of staff members, another is often referred to as a spider TIF. It is in some ways, a little different from the other types or from other business personal property TIFs. It's just referred to that because the property that's being described takes the shape of the telecom provider's network, and thus spiders out, through the community. The total TIF across 25 years, we estimated at approximately $14.4 million minus administration fees. Here's a the map that's included with your materials that shows elements of the underground network that is proposed. Then I'll bring us to a conclusion, and again, staff, representatives from Meridian, and anyone else is happy to address your questions. So why is it a TIF for this project? First of all, it wouldn't happen without it. The finances being so tight, but we consider the benefits to be substantial. There's no tax increase to the public by virtue of adopting this TIF, and there's no funding drop for other taxing units because of this. It wouldn't happen without the TIF, thus 0 equals 0. But there will be new revenue in the community to multiple taxing units through employment and other taxes by virtue of operating the business that they intend. And then one of the things about this is we felt that this process gives transparency. It passes through multiple public boards. This is a big investment, a big partnership, and we want to make sure that we are as transparent as possible about this process. We're seeking, this gives us visibility into the tax revenue. It comes in and then it's rebated back, so we see that, and then we will be capturing 5% of the costs for administrative overhead of the TIF and TIF district. A few other things we wanted to bring up. Indiana business personal property tax TIF districts exist in, I'm going to just say many places. This list, which includes West Lafayette, Wabash, Greendale, etc., is only from the last few years from that our consulting partners, our financial partners have shared with us. And then I think more importantly, and more connected to this, TIF districts for telecommunications infrastructure. Again, the spider TIF concept have been established in Crawfordsville, Wabash, Lafayette, Franklin, Huntington, Lebanon, and Manchester. So this isn't the kind of project that is rare by any means in terms of the overall using these types of TIF districts. And then it's also been utilized at least in these other cities within Indiana. So my last summary page, this is a compelling project. It provides community-wide gigabit fiber to the premise network with open access after a period of time. It's built by a unique partner, Meridian, which is a benefit corporation committed to sustainability and equity. It's we have a groundbreaking digital equity offering of 250 megabits symmetrical with no fees and essentially at $0. There's no tax increase using the TIF and no substantive negative impact to other taxing units by virtue of doing this. And we wish to thank you for your consideration of this project, which is a long time coming, and we hope for your support and are happy to answer any questions that you might have. I'll just pop up this quote. One of our advisors throughout this process is Blair Levin. He was the architect of the Obama administration's national broadband plan, and we have been periodically updating him throughout this process and seeking his guidance on it. we believe this is as compelling a project as he does, and we're thankful for your consideration. Leave it at that, and then if there are some updates or additional thoughts from staff to share on the TIF process or some of the financials, feel free to jump in.
I don't know, we have with us also Richard Starkey from Barnes and Thorpe. Rich, I don't mean to put you on the spot totally, but would you want to give just a brief overview of the process? Talk about the type of tip that we're creating here and just the process for the RDC. I think that might be helpful as well.
Sure. So Rich Starkey with Barnes and Thorpe. So I came up with this process about 12 years ago or so with the city of Wabash. With Redevelopment. They wanted to come in, but the capital costs were so expensive, we really said we need some kind of incentive. So we worked with them to create this process of the spider tip. And basically what we're doing is when the taxes are paid, and their personal property taxes, so they report their taxes themselves, when those taxes are paid and it's based on per linear foot of fiber is the tax. They then are able to receive what's been referred to as a rebate, but it's actually a debt instrument we create. And that debt instrument we call an agreement that allows them to receive money back when they pay it. So we created this TIF from all the personal property, the taxes that they pay, and so as they pay the tax, the agreement says they give it back to them over in this case, 20-year period, and they're getting back 95% is what has been proposed. 5% goes back to the city for administrative costs. So the process then is to create an allocation area under the statute, the 36-7-14 statute, which you're probably familiar with, which is what the Redevelopment Commission operates under, to create an allocation area which starts out with what you have before you today, which is a declaratory resolution. And that declares the area, which in this case is wherever the fiber is, that's the area. So what's unique about this is that normally we draw a map where physical location is bounded by streets and say that's the area. Well, here we're saying wherever the fiber is, that's the area. So it can go over on poles, it can go underground, it can go through other existing allocation areas. It doesn't affect any of those. And so wherever the fiber is the allocation area. And then from that declaratory resolution, along with the plan that you have in front of you, it will go to the Plan Commission for the Plan Commission to say, yes, this is part of the plan of development for the city of Bloomington. Then we'll go before the city council for them to approve it. We'll publish a notice for public hearing. It comes back before this body for you guys all to hear whatever the Plan Commission and or the Common Council said, and then you would confirm the adoption of the allocation area with the confirmatory resolution. I think we have that scheduled right now for July 5th. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if that's clear as well.
Before jumping into questions, I also want to introduce Scott Lehman and Nick Phillips, who are with us from Meridian, and they'd like to say something. They're welcome. If not, we can just leave their statements to any questions that you might have.
You did a great job explaining the rating rules, so appreciate that after all this time. But other than that, we're excited to work with the city and we're excited to be here. Look forward to breaking ground and getting access to all the residents.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your presentation, students. So are there questions from commissioners to resolution? Yeah, open it up for questions.
We'll start with couple. One, that it becomes a public utility. So just to clarify, that means that it's sort of like water for the city. the fiber system will become, this fiber system will become like the city utilities? As in public
Yeah,
utilities?
this fiber will be a private infrastructure that is operated as an open access network.
But then after 25 years, it becomes Bloomington's?
No. That's not the plan.
And based on the fiber, it's not under any regulatory aspect other than city of Bloomington at the time, based on our tenant agreement.
You know, regulatory as in, there's state regulations that apply to this, but you know, cities and cities are fairly limited in what they can do in terms of regulating telecommunications infrastructure.
Yeah, the rate structure overall over a period of time will be determined based upon what the cost is and what the charges that are necessary. Right now, given the federal payback, the underserved areas that don't have digital quality, it's a cost of zero. But in the future, 25 years from now, it could be a different increment.
I mean, I think, you know, potentially, but the intent would be to carry through with the understanding that we have, you know, throughout the coming years.
Rick, could you describe open access network also, just to?
Right,
Addressing that question.
Sure thing. The concept of an open access network is one where there's a network provider and an ISP. The network provider builds and operates the fiber electronic equipment, perhaps owns the conduit, you know, the data centers and all of that, which is required to operate the network as a network. Then an ISP is able to utilize that network to provide services to end users. So that ISP would then bill and charge customers for use of the network. And then in terms of open access, those two are different. A party owns the network and maintains it, and a party operates the ISP and interacts directly with residential end users. In the case of the providers that we currently have in our community, they are one and the same, and they only offer their network. Their network is only for their own use. It's not operated, as a type of wholesale system.
So for this, just to restate, because I'm doing this for myself, so that, sorry if I'm overstepping. It's just to say, like, so for a period of time, Meridian is going to operate as the ISP and the network owner. No, there's no exclusive contract.
There is, but it's with an ISP that they are entering into a contract with. Do either of you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just summary, ultimately, all Meridians and assets that we've done with fiber space here in Europe, the intent is to have this be open access for multiple different ISPs to provide different service offerings and have ensure some price competitiveness, and give options to the community. What we found in the US, when you start a new network, is you need somebody to commit to serving that network. When you start open access, you'll get 10 people to show up and none of them will care. And they'll give it a shot and then they'll leave, or they'll, not to disparage all the people you talk about, but you'll get a change in strategy and move on. Here, we're requiring them to make a commitment that they're going to be here for the exclusivity period. They're going to open a retail store, like a brick and mortar store that people go into. They're going to be local community. They're going to be at basketball games, state fair, like every event that's here, they need to be here. And for that, they get basically a head start. So they get an exclusivity period, and that's their period, and they get to do as well as they can. At the end of it, more people are going to come on, and they're going to compete with them. So they get a head start. And in exchange, they have to commit to being here and being part of the serving this from Seattle or somewhere.
Could we pick that on ISP yet?
Yes.
Can you share that with us?
You sign it the next week or so. And we'll have.
What I can share about them is that we have discussed this ISP with with our consulting partners, CTC, and they found them to be highly reputable and capable. So we're comfortable with the choice, but it's not ours to disclose at this point.
Sure, questioning other people, I can circle back.
Okay, as we discuss the contractual aspect, and we start looking at that, Larry, I see that we're actually contracting with Hoosier Networks.
So they're setting up an entity, right? So Meridian, as I understand it, please feel free to correct me. Meridian SAS is an international company. They're going to set up an Indiana entity, which will be called Hoosier Networks LLC, which will essentially be an affiliate right here in Indiana to actually own and operate the network. So in terms of the taxpayer, because in order to create this type of TIF for personal property, personal business property, the taxpayer actually has to be named under the statute. And so for that naming purposes, it's going to be.
How do we make sure, not to tie, I think the personal property tax aspect is a fine thing to do. The question I have in regards to it, how do we make sure from a Meridian standpoint, this Hoosier Networks is also tied into that from an international standpoint, and not disparaging in any capacity about international aspect, but Tipton, Indiana had this situation occur with the transmission manufacturing facility that went out there.
So maybe to answer a couple of questions about or clarification about Ready. So we are a fund manager, and there's 8 funds. So the headquarters is in Europe, and through there, they're great. They're broken up geographically. And right now, there's what's called Europe 4, which is misnomer. It's actually the 3rd European fund, but Europe 4, and they focus on Europe. There's Africa 2, which focuses on Africa, and this one is North America 3. So this one only focuses on the US and Canada. That's all we do here. We're perfectly sandboxed in. We do not, nothing that happens in the others affects those. And the entirety, not the entirety, but the majority of the investors in this fund are US based pension funds and US life insurance companies. So 74% of them are US, the other 16 are Canadian, and then there's 10 are. So it is very US focused. And the reason that we have Hoosier Networks, so each one of our projects, be it in the telecom space or airports or whatever else we do, once we set them up, they're their own living, breathing company. So Hoosier Networks will have a CEO based here. People on staff that is based here, and that company is run on its own. So it can't have a strategic change like some of the other previous significant others. I don't know what we'll call them. Like we can't move. So like as soon as the project's committed, which will be in the next couple of weeks, assuming we get through this process, the money is allocated to this. I mean, we can't. It's a one-way door. Once somebody commits to a project, we can't take it back. So the money gets invested in the Hoosier Networks, and it can't be taken back.
Okay.
And then also within the contract, there is that we can't sell Hoosier Networks for a period of time, which I think we have 10 years. So and even after that 10-year period, if we do choose to sell, which to we've never sold anything. So first, you guys would have a list and have approval rights and who that could be.
Bitter point of clarification, it's not like there's a corporate entity. This is a standalone project. It's not reporting back in except for the shareholders.
You mentioned these other cities like Columbus and Shelbyville. Will they have their own in-town group, or will the Bloomington group work with them too?
The only ones mandated to happen is Bloomington. Okay. It's not to say there won't be one in the other ones. It's required.
But they could work through us, or?
Yeah, I mean, so the same ISP provider will serve all 4 markets, and obviously we will serve all 4 markets. But for example, from a Hoosier Net's point of view, our corporate team ISP will be based here. They will not have, and also obviously have to travel and go there. But
Thank you.
And all those cities are considered the same kind of line. It's not.
So does that mean that our redevelopment commission, if there's some issue that comes up and we need to use those TIP funds appropriately, those TIP funds might actually be facilitating or paying for something in Columbus or whatever?
They're all doing their own independent redevelopment.
So the local taxes, so what's working,
Right.
local redevelopment.
Correct.
So that part is separate.
Right.
Has there been any discussion earlier in the process of the opportunity for collaboration in our county? Just because obviously it's a geographic continuous area, and just trying to understand the potential for that either in previous discussions or possibly in the future.
I would say that's largely for the future. When we first started this, we were doing what we could to try to secure fiber within the community. There's nothing that we have that's excluding Monroe County from partnering. In fact, I would say it's, Bartholomew County has approached Meridian separately, but they're also put a lot of, I think, CARES or ARPA funds on the table to move forward with that. So there's nothing in our agreement that would exclude Monroe County from pursuing, a partnership with Meridian. And I think, one of the things in the agreement, this discussion here with the RDC is dealing with TIF district within the corporate boundaries of Bloomington. But as part of our agreement, we are seeking coverage of the areas that were proposed for annexation as well, which, reaches out into Monroe County, obviously.
So is the county a part of this?
No, yeah, not as a partner.
I do have a question about the map. I was wondering if you might be able to put that back up.
Sure. Shouldn't have been so hasty in reorganizing my workspace here. All right, here we go.
So I'll start asking my question while it's
go
pulling
ahead,
up. I'm just trying to get a better sense of what areas were prioritized in terms of designating on the map of where the underground infrastructure is gonna go. And I'll tell you where I'm heading with this, which is in part, it's not exclusively about this, but where I'm looking at it is this digital equity plan, which I think is amazing. I'm really impressed with how this has been put together, and I really appreciate the opportunity to support the plan with an effort like this. I think overall, I'm really impressed with this initiative. I'm just trying to kind of connect the different dots. And so my question is specifically the digital equity plan talks about the Bloomington Housing Authority as an example of lower income properties. And when I look at where the blue lines are, I'm not really seeing much in Reverend Butler or Crestmont neighborhoods. And I was wondering, whereas Walnut was like, it looks like it's covered. So if you could tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think, the way I can address this is what you are seeing here is the proposal for underground infrastructure. Everything else that's part of this network, will be aerial on Duke poles. So the total coverage map for the project covers, everything within Bloomington. With the exception, I would say, of the campus area, IU has its own network. So, where you're not seeing blue, there's aerial, infrastructure around the roads. So the intent is to fully cover all of the community. It's just we're approaching the RDC for the infrastructure that will be, an underground asset that is owned and managed by Meridian, not the area fiber that will be on the poles.
And what's the decision point for what goes underground versus what's area?
I'll need to leave that to Meridian.
There's multiple factors that go into that. One is the availability of the poles. Not every pole can support putting additional fiber on it. And so if that's the case, part of it is speed to market, is believe it or not faster to go underground than it is to go aerial. That largely is due to the coordination required working with the existing electric utility, which we all understand, we want to make sure we get that right. But it does have a longer lead time than it does to go underground. It is more expensive to go underground, so we do have to take that into consideration as we think about the ability to really put that 85% coverage in place. This, when we take a look at this particular map, you'll notice a lot of maybe the downtown district or nearby areas are going to be aerial, because that also is more expensive to construct where there is more congestion.
My question is specifically about the public housing authority side, so.
Yeah, our commitment is to provide, we're gonna do 85% of the market, we'll be 85% of the low income. If we do 95% of the market, it will be 95% of the low income community. Those two will be met, those two will be addressed on par. And we'll actually go a step further, where we want to make sure that where it's possible, we get the key rates of those communities to reflect the take rates of the community at large. It's not enough to build fiber down the street, pat yourself on the back, consider that success. We need to educate that community, let them know what's available, pull the fiber into units, and then get connected and educate them on how to use it. And that's part of all the program. We talk digital equity, it's not just the dollars, it's all of those elements that are going to facilitate that program.
One other point I would add is, we have, discussed using HUD housing vouchers as one of the criteria, that would determine eligibility for the program. And if that's the case, then it would include the housing authority apartment facilities.
Well, sure, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Does the housing authority at the present moment provide internet to their residents?
They
I
do.
think so, just through normal existing providers.
Yeah, they aren't a provider, but
Do they subsidize is what I'm asking in regards to.
the housing authority doesn't subsidize.
Okay.
But some of the individuals that might take, Comcast or AT&T there are eligible for federal subsidies, but, it's up to those individuals.
Yeah, that's individual by individual.
Individual by individual, but
Yeah.
the national situation that's occurring right now with the digital equity that's being provided as we were demonstrating,
Mhm.
that the Biden administration has at the present moment is equitable all the way across. It's not specific.
Right, and I think, what we're looking at with this program is a number of other providers, they certainly, utilize the federal subsidies and can encourage, their customers, to do so, but what they offer in exchange for that is significantly less than what we're proposing here.
From a speed standpoint.
Yeah, and, the federal broadband definition is still currently, 25 megabit download and 3 upload, which is,
Significantly slower than what we're looking at here.
yes, very much so.
Okay.
We're gonna just add one more clarification. So Rick, you mentioned it was only the underground fiber, but the way this is written in terms of this particular type of tip, it's anywhere where that business personal property is, so it would include those fiber lines that are above and below ground.
That's correct.
Just
And the equipment that services those, so there's more equipment that will do it.
Right.
point of clarification, just make sure you did mention 20 years, but in the documents 25, so I'm just making sure.
So 25 is the maximum life
Okay.
of the potential tip district. So there's a statutory, but we've kind of agreed that 20-year is probably the appropriate lifespan for this particular project. So it will be for 20 years. I don't, in the resolution, is that's approved.
Okay, and then getting to the dollar and cents aspect of it from a standpoint of what the city's gonna put in. And it's approximately $1 million will come out of the digital equity fund. Based on that, where is our balance in the digital equity fund? None of our business, I don't think it's part of redevelopment. but does it have-
Yeah, so right now, we do not have a separate digital equity fund. What we have used for digital equity investments over the past few years is the Mayor's Recover Forward initiative. We granted 35,000 into not-for-profits for digital equity projects in the first year. And in 2021, we did 50,000. And now that 50,000 has moved out of the, it basically moved into my department, into ITS, as a permanent or semi-permanent part of our budget. So we're now funding that out of the ITS budget. But those right now are going to digital equity grants. There's not a broader fund for that, but as we move forward with this, project, putting it into action, we will be establishing a fund that would support these projects.
To cover the dollars that were
Correct.
allocated accordingly. Okay. When we get into this into the financing aspect, with the exception of the personal property tax dollars that are coming in, is there, based upon the allocations of our Spider TIF and the other, is there requirements that the city would have to backstop any economic development bonds or anything like that? No. It's simply the personal property tax.
Right.
What we're looking at.
And one of the nice things about that is that it's self-policing. If they decide tomorrow they're not gonna do, let's say 6 months from now, they decide we're not gonna do what we said we're gonna do, well, they're not gonna do the benefit.
So,
They don't have a chance.
I'm gonna follow up because of the discussion about the $1 million from the digital equity fund, because I think I didn't really see it in your presentation, but in the actual resolution, it talks about how the city will pledge this $1 million that we use to pay for installation of cost of fiber to qualifying residents up to $350 per unit. And then Meridian will pay an annual digital equity dividend of $85,000 to the digital equity fund and half of the cost of bringing fiber to income qualifying residents as long as funds remain in the city's initial contribution. And then after the city's initial contribution of $1 million is expended from the fund, the company will cover 100% of the installation costs of bringing fiber to income qualifying residents. So I have some questions related to that. One is, how long is that for? Is that in perpetuity for the 20 years up to 25-year maximum period that arrangement is in place?
Right now, I believe that's the understanding in the agreement. Again, we're working to finalize that, but yeah.
It's capped in terms of the amount, it's capped out at the 5 year.
For the city's $1 million, yes.
The city's million is capped out, but is the company's $85,000 annual contribution capped out with a ceiling? Okay, that's what I'm trying
It's
to.
just an annual contribution.
Okay, and it's annual as long as the tip is in place, that's what I'm trying to. clarify.
As long as the contracts, the MDA, the development agreement with the city.
Does that, I guess that stays, doesn't get cost of living adjustments over time, just because the cost of, the value of that over a 20-year period is obviously going to decrease. So, but that just, that actual sum stays the same.
That's what's initially proposed.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
Are there questions or questions?
Oh,
Yep, ladies, sure, always.
I think as part of the digital equity fund or aspect of it, those who already pay get SNAP or get any kind of proven government benefits will get $30 per month benefits, so they pay $0. So the rest of us pay $30 a month. To whom or how? And do I pay in addition to what I pay for extended use contract? $30 to this and whatever it is I pay to.
Yeah, if you, as a community member, if you're interested in Meridian's, ISP service, then you would pay the rates that they, that they are offering.
Oh, so I could switch from Comcast to Meridian,
Yes.
so their ISP, right?
Yes, exactly.
They're
Exactly.
their infrastructure, I can switch if I wish. But if I get SNAP and other benefits, I would, $30 per month would provide me with the provider that comes through this system, this agreement.
Correct. There's an offering of the, of the ISP as part of the digital equity plan, which matches the $30. And it's as we've described.
And then one last question, I think, it's probably for Larry. But on page 10 of the agreement, seems like it might be very pro forma language, but I find it odd in this particular context. The second paragraph says that the purposes of this plan are to benefit the public health, safety, morals, and welfare of the citizens of the city. So I would like to know how it's gonna benefit our morals, and who's gonna be the judge of that. It seems really weird to have that word moral.
Let me just say, this is the language in the statute that you have to find.
Oh, we have to use that.
36.714 requires this language.
Oh, but and that's state language.
But I'm sure that somebody can figure out how that works.
Access to information is very important, access to education of all sorts, and certainly broader access to the internet brings a greater civic knowledge and duty of citizens into the state, which ultimately elevates the morals, hopefully. I assume that's what the General Assembly was thinking whenever they crafted that into law.
Mhm.
But certainly, it's one of the classic purviews, just a little bit, it's one of the classic purviews of the kind of the state powers. That's why that language ends up in there. It's like a holdover
Thank you very much.
long ago.
I just got educated. Thank you.
Do you have any idea from a dollar standpoint, what the other self-reporting internet providers are paying in personal property tax?
I do not, that's not information that they shared or would probably be.
Well, it would be something from a taxing entity is the reason I
Right.
ask from a standpoint of knowledge in regards to just know where it is in that aspect of being equitable all the way across and understanding. I applaud these guys for even taking this step because what you're looking to do is a law.
Is there any projection of how many households the digital equity dividend and fund and combined the city and company's contribution might be able to cover? I mean, just how many households is that being factored out?
You know, we've made some estimates, but that, you know, varies if you're looking at the different criteria. Yeah, eligibility for these different programs, plus there's overlap in them, so you don't necessarily know. I mean, I think we're thinking at least, yeah, well, more than a few thousand, you know, would be.
Well, I wasn't thinking so much eligibility per se, but how much the investment would cover in terms of how many households it could potentially cover. Obviously, that's presuming eligibility, but if we've got $1 million and up to $350 per household, and then the match from Meridian, how many, what is that?
Yeah,
math
if, you know,
do?
if we were to utilize that for, you know, solely for the connection to houses, then it would be, you know, 1 million divided by, yeah, 350. Although, you know, I think that also varies because maybe Scott can speak to this, the cost of the drops, you know, is going to vary, you know, significantly from location to location. So we're just not sure, but you know, it's going to cover a significant number of people who move into high speed fiber internet, which they currently don't have.
Yeah, I think also, even with the city's exhausted $1 million, which I think was the base math, really, but we still will make sure everybody else is connected with sign up, right? That's on us. Yeah, we can't turn down somebody else's sign up. Stay.
Okay, that's helpful. I was trying to understand the.
Yeah, no, that's really just it. If the $1 million gone, then we all did a great job. We've got 2,800 and some odd people connected, and then 2,900 through X. That's on us.
Your point, it's more expensive. That's the Meridian side of the equation. That's not the city making any incremental. That's up for us to make sure we get this residents.
Your questions from commissioners?
What's the upside from Meridian?
So I mean, Meridian in general, our general philosophy, which two things in this touch benefits partners, we'll get to that secondly. I mean, we're a long-term investor in infrastructure. So as I said, our investors who invest in Meridian are pension funds, life insurance companies, and they like to match their investments to their very long-term obligations. So it's to do that, which is why we don't sell anything, because they get very upset when we give the money back. Because the whole point to us was they were trying to deal with their obligations that are 30, 40, some odd years down the road. They invest in other funds when they need stuff 5 years from now. That's why we don't sell things. It matters. And we also, we like infrastructure, and I know this word passive, but it's somewhat passive in terms of we're not a nice thing, we don't know how to do that, but we do believe in the long term. One, the city of Bloomington, two, fiber. So those two match up. So it fits with kind of the three pillars of that Meridian's equity that we do invest in transportation infrastructure. So large investor redevelopment for Oregon, that's kind of the big project. Energy transition, we fully believe that's a focus. We do energy storage and that kind of stuff. And then fiber, these are all things that have very long-term payback periods and very much involvement in those things. So that's why we like this. Secondly, to the benefits corporation point, what a benefits corporation is in France, which is perfectly registered, that we will register here, so it does, is it allows us to have a dual mandate. So every company in the world you've ever dealt with has to do share duty to the shareholders or investors, and it has to do right by them. Have to make their money. Benefits corporation, it's well, we still have to do that, but a dual mandate, which we keep it equal. One of the two, we can take a less than optimal financial decision, as long as it's within your charter. And our charter is for the achievement of sustainable development. Some of those are the quality of access to options, bridging digital divide, services, telehealth, all these things. So fiber meets a lot of these. So that's the economic upside, and that's the social upside.
Appreciate that.
Last call for questions or comments from commissioners. Are there any comments from the public, either online or present in the room?
We have somebody in the room who wants to speak.
I'll defer to anybody online first if we want to go.
Seeing none.
So I fully understand that there's no legal obligation to answer questions that I might ask, but I'm trying to popularize the notion of with commenters asking questions instead of just expressing their opinions. And as a journalist with the Eastern Bulletin, I gave ask them, by the way, I should say that at the beginning. That's what I do, I ask questions. So here's some questions. And there's a bunch of them. I'm hoping that they might get answered, even though I realize there's no legal obligation. So does the RDC, with 3 members present today, out of 4 were seated, potentially 5, who theoretically could be here if all of the vacancies were filled. What's the majority that's needed? Is it a majority of those present voting, or is it a majority of the potential members? So 3 out of 5, or 3 out of 4, or could you pass it over 2 out of 3 today? Here's some dates. This is sort of the second question. June 13th, June 14th, June 15th. As I work out the calendar, the Planning Commission is scheduled to meet and vote on this June 13th. The next day, Economic Development Commission is supposed to vote on June 14th, and then the City Council on June 15th. That rapid sequence for someone whose professional responsibility is to be skeptical suggests to me that there's some urgency here. Is there some urgency to that conflict, or do I have the time to move on? Next question. So projects in other cities. Columbus, Indiana is my hometown, so I have kind of an interest in this question. Is the Bloomington deal crucial to the Shelbyville, Columbus, and Martinsville projects? So phrased differently, if Bloomington killed this project to prove it, one of the public bodies said, no, we won't stand for this, would that kill the other 3 projects? And if so, why should the Columbus and Martinsville here advocating for us to go forward? Following up on the remarks from Meridian on take rate, the idea being the take rate in the lower income areas would be, or you aspire that would be roughly the same
as in other areas. Abstracting away from lower income areas and take rate, what kind of take rate does Meridian need in order to make this project succeed? And why do you think that that is plausible? And then about the map, I'm now confused by the discussion about what the map means. Because when I came to the meeting, I thought I understood the map to represent the TIF district. And now I think that might not exactly be the case. If it's not, well, I'm not even sure how to phrase the question. So can the TIF district include the aerial parts? Something that Larry Allen said made me think, yes, it can, and it in fact does. But something else made me think that, okay, the map is not, it doesn't capture the aerial part, and it's only the TIF district. So what does the map represent? Is it the underground part only? Is it the TIF district? And if the aerial part can be a part of the TIF district, why isn't that in the map? So some additional clarity on the map would be really useful. And finally, actually, this is not, sorry, just look up. So following up on the topic raised by Commissioner Hutton about it being a public utility or not, has the city considered a purely public model like the one being developed in Palo Alto, California, and Fort Collins, California? And I guess finally, this is kind of a informational request. Would it be possible to get a copy of the slide deck that would be presented posted to the RPC document repository so that we can find it in the future? Thanks.
Yes. Any other comments from the public? So I have a question of protocol. Is there opportunity to return to questions or comments from commissioners if they've been prompted by anything that's come up?
Of course.
Sounds like, okay, so are there any commissioners who would like to comment or ask questions based on some of the things that we've heard?
Well, I'll go from a geographer background, so the map one, which seems to show, I agree with that. The map seems to show the underground cable fiber. And you talked about the aerial was included too in this agreement. So how could we see what the aerial, or is that to be decided in the aerial if we can't do underground in some areas?
So the establishment, and Rich, feel free to correct anything that I say, the establishment of the economic development area is the corporate boundaries of the city. So anywhere that personal property is located along those city. And so in this case, it doesn't always have to be the case with TIF districts, but in this case, this type of TIF district is going to be determined with those boundaries.
So really the map we see is a best estimate or best projection of likeliness where underground fiber would be placed.
So the map, I mean, the important part of the map is it's showing the corporate boundaries of the city of Bloomington. The blue highlighted parts were also illustrative to show like where these lines were going to go. And to be just perfectly honest with you, I did not realize that the map was not going to include the aerial where the lines go. But that doesn't mean that they would be excluded from that TIF district.
So that's exactly
Please.
Clarify a little bit. So the actual economic development area, which is the same as the allocation area, is where the fiber is.
Right.
Only. It's not necessarily the boundaries of the city, it's just where the map shows the boundaries of the city, because that's where everything's gonna go.
Right.
But technically, it's just where the fiber is.
And in your sentence, it means underground, aerial, or,
Right.
fiber posts. Okay. Great, thank you.
The next comment is not meant to slow or stop anything in regards to you guys. But something was brought up in regards to, there's 4 commissioners that are seated, a 5th one that has already been appointed. And in order to be fair to all representatives of the individual appointing bodies, I intend to make a motion to move to another meeting where all commissioners are.
So the RDC operates under Robert's rules, and so the way Robert's rules work in this regard is that it's a majority of the members present.
enough.
So it had to be 2 out of 3. And the fact that we have quorum here is fine, the 3 out of it. So currently we have 4 seated members, just as a clarification. There is a 5th member that's been proposed, has not been bonded, it's not oath. And so she's not here participating as part of that. We'll make an announcement on her appointment soon. But in terms of the way the RDC would operate under Robert's rules, it would take 2 out of 3.
Good.
So but as far as your motion, of course, you're able to
Robert's rules wins.
bring a motion, but that's just how the voting.
Thanks for that clarification.
Appreciate that.
And also just speaking to that point and somewhat reflecting one of Dave's questions, we do have a schedule because our goal is to advance this and allow the council to be able to vote on it before their recess. Because that will add an addition of multiple months prior to the project being able to start on the ground.
I will ask about the question, how does the other cities involved, is it all or none? Is there, just wondering kind of how that balances out in terms of Bloomington compared to the other cities that are part of this project.
Without giving too much away, Bloomington is the fulcrum. The project does require a certain amount of size and maybe some other stuff.
Okay, well, that's certainly fair. Thank you for that clarification. What is in terms of the discussion about the take rate, what rate is needed for financial sustainability for the project, and how do you calculate that?
Hesitate, and we can't answer the exact number of price in the room. Somewhat of a confidential business case, but I would point out that, in the event to not achieve the take rates we intend to, that risk is on us, right? I mean, that's the money.
And at what point would we know that?
Well, the network won't go anywhere regardless. I mean, even if we're operating at a sub-optimal take rate, we can't move it. Like it's buried or tagged in wires, right? So the network will be here forever, regardless of if we lose a significant portion of our investment or not. It can't go anywhere else. The network will always be operating. The operating costs for a network are relatively minimal. The cost is in building it. If you got the building it part wrong, we already built it. It's very hard to lose money on an operational point of view. You just gotta get the money.
So do we anticipate that it is going to be so much more economical that the competitors are going to be non-existent?
No, we anticipate they will still be here. They have their own networks, and much like our point, the Comcast and Smithfields and everybody else who offers service, and they've already paid to build their networks, they're going to continue to offer service. What the key is that we think we can offer better service at a better price, just because those.
So competition will still remain.
Competition, yeah, they'll still be here. They're not going. Better worse.
You get better service than competition.
Yeah.
So that said, because that's of course a good segue in terms of just asking the question, kind of again related to what Ms. Hutton asked earlier, which is the question about a public utility capacity. And I'm not familiar with the Fort Collins or Palo Alto models myself, but maybe Mr. Dietz, you could just describe what that means and then how that is considered or not in terms of.
Yeah, there are a number of different models for for broadband. A city-owned utility is one of them. Those tend to be successful in markets where the city government is also owns or controls the electric utility, because essentially as they're modernizing their electrical plant, they string fiber for smart meters, etc., and then deploy broadband, deploy high-speed fiber off of the existing poles that they own. So there's no real cost to the municipality to doing that, to do this. And, if we were to do that, you're looking at, an investment that is, in excess of $50 million comparable to what, Meridian is proposing. And then the city taking on the responsibility for the operation, as well. And so we find this is, better in alignment with the realities of our situation. But I would also say that this is among the better or best case scenarios that we have for a public-private partnership on this. And so we, although we acknowledge the existence of utilities models, it's one that is really outside of our reach in terms of costs.
Questions from commissioners? Well, I appreciate everybody's discussion. Do we have a motion to consider for this resolution?
Deb Hutton, I move to approve redevelopment commission resolution 2233.
We have a second.
You can't second as the person chair, it would have to be you, Randy. It's
Oh.
commissioner.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Otherwise it just dies and we'll bring it back.
Do you want to read it for discussion?
The discussion is simple, based on, as we talk about equity and such, and the aspect of, there's only three of us, which I was unaware that was a situation that would create an issue with Robert's rule. I don't want to delay a project, I don't want to do a downside, but I think it's important for everybody to have their voice from each appointing agency that has put a person on this commission.
Agency.
It will come back to you.
So I understand, but at that point, we've missed the other individual potentially to other individual. So from a standpoint, from just a discussion item to make ourselves available in order to meet the time frame. Now, I'm one person of four presently. How we can set a schedule out to move things in a forward fashion with all individuals being able to have that voice.
So
This is how we voted for every single item for the police.
Yeah, we had this vacancy for.
I understand. Cindy's been here and then, unfortunately, God rest his soul, I wish they were still here, but I can't change those past issues. But when it comes up from equity standpoint and everybody having their voice, that resonated with me in regards to being able to do that rather than making just a decisionary basis. Inclusiveness, internet speed, and it is now what in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, internet is just above clothing. So consequently, it's very important accordingly, but to have that voice of all individuals, in my own personal opinion, is extremely important in our society. And I don't want to just make a motion just to move things forward without having those individuals have.
just give options to what you're saying, Commissioner, just to be really clear. So the thing that would have to happen if this was delayed, we'd have to find a time, we have to be able to do 48 hours notice, proper notice for a new meeting. As was already noted in the meeting, the timetable's pretty extraordinarily tight in this regard. So likely we have, today's Tuesday, the earliest meeting we could possibly have is Friday. Likely with notice, and that would mean availability from all commissioners to be present, or at least 3 of you to be present, physically present, and 1 of you potentially participating electronically. Another option is if you wanted, if there's another option on the table, which is you could second it and still vote against it based on the reservations that you have.
That's kind of wishy-washy.
I'm just giving you options in terms of what could happen in terms of not having to come back here, not having to have a new consideration of this particular thing. It could be seconded, and then it could potentially, and then the other
What
option.
are the pros and cons of either of those? I'm just trying to understand in terms of falling for lack of a second versus voting, or bringing it to the table and then voting down.
if two of you voted for it, it would pass here and it would be able to proceed on to. Of course, we could certainly address those considerations, particularly because as mentioned, as Mr. Starkey mentioned, this does come back to you, actually it comes back for a public hearing later, which is a little bit more of a formal process in terms of having to accept public comment. So after it goes through the vetting of the plan commission and they review the economic development plan and give comments, and also city council potentially. And so you'll have a lot of input for this to come back to you and kind of take into that input, possibly amend anything that needs amending, make those changes, and also conduct that public hearing. And at that point, certainly, we have a little bit more flexibility on that part of it. So that could be something where I'm just giving options. I'm not. Please understand.
That's what,
Okay.
you're good,
Okay.
but how the process is supposed to work, and we appreciate that very, very much.
And so we can make sure that we have as many, all members present for that type of thing. That could still be a consideration there in terms of pros and cons to it is, one's stopping this resolution. So it would have to be, we'd have to have a motion made and seconded to basically postpone this to the next meeting date, whenever that might be. Con to that is technically for the ordinance to go forward, there's an ordinance part of this, that's the financing mechanism. That is scheduled for first reading at council this week and for consideration next week for committee of the whole. And then we have kind of follow-on meetings for the planning commission and presentations to them. Those become in danger by delaying of action, because if we can't get a quorum here in time, in an appropriate time to consider this ahead of time, that kind of throws things into flux. So those are kind of the options on the table in terms of pros, cons about what we need to do.
Thank you for that discussion or clarification. I understand and appreciate your concerns and would ideally prefer to have all voices present. I will just note, at least in my mind, we did have a presentation initially on this, even though we didn't have the resolution in front of us yet last week. And I feel like there's an opportunity for members to share questions, concerns in the interim, even if, because I don't know that Cindy knew that she couldn't make it today. I think she originally thought she could, and then that was the last minute change.
That was my understanding, and just in clarification accordingly, based on, I assumed she would be here or unavailable. And then until Robert's Rules of Order was just brought up by Larry, because it's quite frankly been approximately 20 years since I've read them. But they will be on my reading list for later this week, just to clarify. And I did not understand you couldn't make a second.
Right, no.
So with that,
Right.
in itself sets up that lack of democratic process. It becomes something that, I have no problem taking the weight of a vote in regards to it on my own shoulders, but I think that everybody needs to be involved accordingly. And again, if I voted no, I'm outdone, that's okay. It's a democratic process. Appreciate it. I'm grateful we live in a country we can do that. But in the same respect, as we follow the Robert's rules, I was unaware of that. So consequently, it's falling on me to make a second, and I quite frankly don't feel comfortable making a second based upon what it is. Now, I'm going to step outside of that. I will make myself available in particular time in the next time frame in order to keep things moving forward. I don't know how everybody else's schedule is with life. I'm fortunate to have flexibility.
Okay, so I'm just clarifying, we have a motion and it appears we have a lack of a second. So and I appreciate Mr. Cassidy's discussion on how we could proceed in terms of, and then Mr. Allen's discussion of what to do next. Any other in terms of protocol, just to be able to follow through where we stand right
It's like I'm happy to try to call Commissioner Bernard to see if she's available. I don't know what she's doing. I have no idea. That's.
Yeah, you want to put that kind of pressure on Cindy to make a vote here. And without being participatory in this particular discussion.
now. It's my impression or assumption that if she had a virtual option, she might have at least offered that. Thank you for suggesting that.
Sure.
So again, I just return to the question of protocol of what if basically the motion fails.
We could also entertain another motion to postpone consideration of this before, so that.
Okay,
the motion's on the table because it wasn't seconded, so there's nothing to vote on in that regard. But if there's another motion to postpone to the next scheduled meeting, whenever that may be, that might be an appropriate motion at this point.
Is your motion?
I'll make a motion to postpone until the next available meeting of all the commissioners, of which, you know, basically, I apologize for trying to put you guys in the spot to try to make a decision.
Can we clarify? So you're saying all available commissioners? I assume you mean the four.
The four seated, yes,
I just want to make sure that we're
the four seated.
clear.
The other commissioner, potential commissioner is in the wings and waiting to be clarified.
And just as a part of this discussion, if I may suggest, if you could also discuss specific times that you would be available, that would be very wonderful for our staff.
Okay, so
The second is in my hand.
Yes.
So am I allowed to ask questions before I choose the second or not?
Do you want to suggest that?
Yeah, I'm wondering, just because I think it's just such a weird situation where there's a lack of the ability to have a second, even, I wonder if we should just take 5 minutes as staff, and just pause for a minute and just evaluate what the different options are and then come back to the table if that would be helpful. Because I'm not sure I think we're all sort of flying a little bit by the seat of our pants.
Including the timing of what's the latest we could have a meeting.
right.
Yeah, if we could just do a quick review.
Yeah, why don't we have a recess?
Yeah.
Recess of how long?
5 minutes?
5 minutes, okay, recess of 5 minutes. We'll
Does the recording turn off during the
We'll
recess?
reconvene at
Leave it on.
6:35, giving it 6 technically just to make it nice and even. Okay.
I would leave the recording on just unless you want discussion.
So we want to discuss it, we're not doing that. We don't-
Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys.
we don't-
Very much.
I don't want to be here.
No, a recess, people can move about until we can convene.
Yeah, you're in recess, so.
Thanks, Dave. I didn't get which one was which. I got both names, but I don't have to match. Scott on it. Thank you so much. Possible.
My understanding is that the way that the state statute is written is that, you know, the school board members are to be here. Right, and I just, I looked into it, maybe you know more, but it just is because there's potential, you know, because there's state districts that are taking money from and putting it in other directions that could undermine, you know, what the school board or the school corporation's budget is, and that it's an opportunity to be present and aware. But it's.
I'm not.
It's a non-voting member.
Oh, I'm not, yeah, and that was my understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was. You know, yeah, yeah, because
To stay in the loop, right? So that there's
we're
not
in
like-
different, we're on different boards. I have another board, I'm on the insurance committee from CCSC. I go every month to that meeting. That's when I come like here at Joe. And I'm a non-voting member of that. I have input, but I'm non-voting, just like you. I can ask questions, but I cannot.
Makes sense.
Either way. Technically, our resources, you know, obviously we do wait for staff to return, but at least the commissioners will be seen for when.
We're good.
I don't know, I mean, I'm happy to
We're
prompt
good.
them unless they,
We're good. If you want to prompt them.
yeah, I don't know if they're that way, you know, I can do that, okay, thanks.
Is this, I shouldn't probably ask this, but it just occurred to me. That property owner has access to this. Do they have access to it away from that property? Like, is it wireless on their phone, wherever they may be?
I don't know exactly how it works, I know that like,
You understand my question?
in terms of, yeah, well, I know like, for example, AT&T, right, like if you
Yeah,
have.
AT&T, I have it on my phone, my iPad, wherever I am, even if I'm in another state.
Right,
I
yeah.
paid for that bill, okay, do I have that same with this? Because if I was truly one,
Well, but remember, they're the infrastructure, they're not the internet service provider, that's the difference, so I think that that is moot, because the infrastructure is different than that's the provider that is, it's the internet
and
service provider.
AT&T won't be provided through this. so-
Well, again, they've got like a 10-year kind of affiliation they're gonna have, they're selecting that ISP that's gonna be the.
So it's a possibility
They're
that
exclusive,
AT&T.
yeah, they're picking somebody and there's, you know, so many choices to pick from, but for example, if they did pick.
It's so complicated.
Right, so again, there's the main difference is that there's the infrastructure, then there's the delivery, right? They provide the infrastructure, not the delivery. So that it would
So
be.
who will provide their delivery?
Well, that's, again, they were talking about how they've selected someone for this, I think it's a 10-year exclusive affiliation to.
Those are just one.
For the first 10 years, they were explaining earlier, like kind of why having that exclusive relationship is beneficial in terms of getting jump started. And then after that 10-year period, then it will be open to, again, I don't know how they do it in terms of, like, if
Yeah, it's
several
all technical.
ISPs can use the same, you know, or, I don't know how that works once it becomes competitive in terms of how many different ISPs can use the same infrastructure. Yeah.
I find it fascinating how long it has taken fiber optic to really catch on. I took my first class in Florida, probably years ago, and I learned the word fiber optic, and I thought it was just around the corner. Look how long. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Because it sounded so wonderful, the speed and all this stuff. It's like the futuristic things that we used to see. But I agree, things are moving much more rapidly now than they did then. And that's part of the problem. Send back to that.
Sorry for the delay, we're just doing a quick review of Robert's rules. Make sure we understand exactly what the.
Appreciate that. I will be breaking out Robert's rules.
Make a station as to what they will say. They will say that, oh, just a subset of property shields that find small lines.
Oh.
And those, everything is fine anyway in a second. I don't think that the RBC has adopted the set of rules that apply to just small
So it's not effective. Robert rules, it has to be done.
lines.
Oh, well, that may be something we're gonna look at in the future. Okay.
I'm just gonna write it down.
My Robert's rules only got that.
Okay.
My Robert's rules only got that, it's a pocket position given in college. Did Robert's rules ever get updated?
It does, in fact. Yeah, this is the 12th edition.
Ah,
So I
okay.
think this is the latest, but I say that and there's always a 13th edition.
They won't say on system
What you thinking these days?
Yeah.
Okay, it is 6:41, I'm declaring the recess concluded, and we're gonna resume our RAC meeting of May 31st. And I'd like to ask Mr. Allen for some clarification on Robert's Rules of Order for the question at hand.
So the Robert's Rules 413, a chair may put the question on the table without a second. And the fact that it states very clearly in the 12th edition that the absence of a second does not affect the validity of the motion's adoption. So the chair has the discretion at this point to put the question to the entire board that's present for a vote without the second.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that clarification. So we have had a motion for resolution 22-33. And we have not had a second. Using the prerogative described by Mr. Allen, I will put it on the table for a vote. And put it out for the commissioners for a roll call vote.
Deb Hutton, yes.
Randy Cassidy, no, for reasons discussed.
Deborah Myerson, yes. So we have a vote of 2-1 in favor of resolution 22-33.
And as we noted, that's not the, we're just starting the process, so we'll see you all again with this as well. So there's gonna be plenty of public opportunity to comment and question. And if any commissioners think of questions after this, let's be very clear, please feel free to ask them to staff, and we'll be happy to answer.
Thank you all for your collaboration and navigating through the resolution, which is now been. Okay, next item on the agenda is resolution 22-34. And that is a resolution in determination of no excess assessed value in the allocation of areas. And who would like to speak to this?
I can speak to this, Madam Chair. So this is an annual requirement of the RDC before June 15th of every year. You have to give notice of whether there would be any excess assessed value in the TIF areas. As is the case, because the fact that we have debt that we're servicing in projects that we have planned, there is no excess value in any of the TIF areas, either the power, which is affordable. Mr. Askew, okay? Are you okay?
No, that was a demon camera.
Oh, okay. Is your camera okay? I guess we should ask. And then the consolidated TIF area. So what this would be is the RDC will be required to also send notices to the county auditor and to all members, officers who are authorized to fix budgets, tax rates, tax levies in the area. So that'll go to the county, the school corporation, et cetera. Anybody that overlaps with these TIF areas, just giving them notice that there are no excess value. There's a sample, Exhibit A, it's kind of a sample of that letter that we send out, just informing everybody. And we talked to Jeff Underwood, who had to drop off of the meeting to attend the budget hearing, but he confirmed along with our finance advisors that there is no excess valuation this year. So,
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Do you have any questions or comments from commissioners on resolution 22-34?
Is that just something we look at every year?
every single year. Yep.
Sounds
Before
good.
G15, we set up the letters.
And there, when you say there will be no assessed value this year, is that 22,
That is
2022?
the budget year.
January to December?
2022, it's kind of, it fits within that year process. I think technically it's last year's assessed value that reported at 2022, so we always give it as of 2022.
Randy Cassidy, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second,
Deb Hutton, second.
thank you, and we'll take it to a vote.
Deb Hutton, yes.
Randy Cassidy, yes.
Deborah Myerson, yes. All unanimous approving resolution 22-34. Next item on the agenda is 22-35, an amendment to the community development block grant for Summit Hill Community Development Corporation. Director Jody, are you speaking to us?
I am along with Matt Swaney, who's online, program manager for CDBG fiscal improvements. I'll let Matt go into more detail, but this is last year we awarded Summit Hill Community Development Corporation $150,000 in physical improvement money for sidewalks and solar panel installation. As that project has moved forward, they have needed to adjust the scope of that. So I'll let Matt go into a little more detail. I will say what we're asking you to consider tonight is just an amendment to the contract. We're not spending any more money. It's just a sort of a switch in the activity. They need to do it elsewhere than they originally thought because of different construction priorities. So Matt, you want to go into some more detail there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, they've had several projects going on over there, as they always do. And one of the projects was taking utilities and putting them underground, which has affected the sidewalks on a much larger scope than they had originally planned. So to keep the sidewalks in both communities, Reverend Butler and Crestmont, in working order, that we needed to expand the scope of this project to include Reverend Butler so that they could use money there to keep the sidewalks in good repair so that the people of the community would have them to use.
Thank you, Mr. Swinney. Are there any comments or questions from commissioners?
Deb Hutton, Commissioner, a question, Matt. If you're going to do more sidewalks, what is monetarily, what is that going to take away from the original budget? What's going to be lost?
They will probably have to assess the sidewalks in both the communities and take care of the ones with the most need. Obviously, the ones that have to be completely taken out will definitely have to be replaced. Others that were scheduled for replacement are still in good enough usable condition that we may be able to address those at a later date, or if other parts of the project come in under budget, then we would be able to address those sidewalks immediately as well.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing no other questions, that should be asking for comments from the public. Is there anybody online from the public?
There's a couple people that this is guest, but we don't have anything in the chat.
Okay, so seeing no comments from anybody online or in the room, I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 22-2035.
Deb Hutton, I move to approve resolution 2235 as written.
Second.
And roll call for the vote, please.
Deb Hutton, yes.
Randy Cassidy, yes.
Deborah Anderson, yes. Motion carries unanimously. And that's the end of our agenda. Anything else from staff? Inspector Jody, I think you had something you wanted to discuss.
Just want to make sure the commission knew that our annual action plan for HUD for 2022 is going back up for public comment tomorrow. I think I updated you earlier in the year that we prepared our action plan, had it up for public comment, and then probably right after that or right in the midst of it, HUD told us to not turn it in, not post it until we knew the exact allocation amounts for this year. And now that we have those came through on May 13th. And we revised the plan, we'll get it back up tomorrow for public comment for 30 days, come down July 1st, because we can have by July 12th. So that will be up at the library, online, in the lobby here at City Hall. And I think that covers it. It'll also notice the paper, of course. So have that going. Thank you.
Well, how's our response looking in regards to RFP for the neighborhood? Have we gotten?
The off of Arlington Park Drive. We're expecting a small handful, I would say, at this point. So maybe 2, 3 right now, we'll see what comes in on Friday. The responses are due Friday at 4 o'clock. So
When is that meeting?
I'm sorry.
When is that meeting?
Well, there's a meeting. This is the response.
Oh, just the response.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the
That's an interesting thought. That's right.
yeah, the proposals that we sent out a request for information for, we asked those to be back to us by 4 o'clock on Friday. So let you all know. So, yeah. It's a process. So, yeah, it's great.
And then the last question is, the disposition of redevelopment assets that we're getting rid of, did we ever get that done, or are we still in the process of?
Which property?
Those,
4 houses for Habitat.
the 4 houses on Habitat, that's moving forward, of course.
Right, yeah.
Last meeting, this was like my first meeting where we were getting rid of
There was a
some property.
property on West Kirkwood, maybe a house.
Larry, can you help me on what those were?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The disposition of redevelopment property that we put out.
For Cottage Grove.
Cottage Grove.
Oh,
Thank you.
yes.
Yes.
That's, we're working on closing for that.
I just didn't know if that was still moving forward,
It
if we
is.
just said done with it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Did you mention the retreat thing on?
Oh, thank you, Alex. Mr. Carly mentioned, so June 9th, next week. Haven't seen that invite, I'll send it to you. June 9th is the groundbreaking for the retreat at Switchyard project. There's new apartment buildings, 64 units of housing, 48 of which will be affordable. So I'll send that to the commission noon. So Mr. Crowley, should have mentioned that at the outset. I'll get that to you right now.
Anything else for discussion?
Commissioners, I have something, and this relates to the first resolution, which is something I was mistaken on, so I apologize in advance for that already. Thank you, Mr. Starkey, for helping me out with this. Indiana Code 36.7.14.8, subsection H does actually have a specific provision for redevelopment commissions other than county redevelopment commissions that require 3 members to approve a resolution. And so in order for us to pass the resolution that's going to push forward the TIF process, we would have to have another meeting and have somebody provide that for the agenda so that it can be voted on by 4 members and have at least 3 members voting in approval of that for that to pass. So I apologize. In the past, we've operated under Robert's rules, and I think I was thinking 3 out of 5 as been typically, and I was just mistaken in that regard, that there is a 4 of 3, and I was unaware of that. So my apologies to the commission for that advice, but I'd like to correct that and we'll move forward with how.
So you're saying for any motion we make, period, doesn't matter whether it's not special ones, not tip ones, anyone, we, and a 5-member commission, we have to have at least 4 members making the vote, and at least 3 members passing, is that what you're?
3 members can be present as a quorum, but it takes all 3 to pass it. So that was correct, and that's my mistake.
In a meeting of only 3 and present, all 3 have to agree.
That's correct.
Any-
Whereas normal
any
Robert's
motion.
rule, any motion at all, normal Robert's rules would be 2 out of 3, a majority present. But this is a specific statute that would override any general Robert's rules requirements. So
So how's that affect what we just did?
So it means that it is invalid because only 2 out of the 3 passed it. So we would need to, the process, and I will try to draft something so that we all have this, is that we will need to meet again. We will need to revive that motion and that resolution for the agenda, hopefully with 4 members present. Consider it.
Okay, let's go back again.
Yeah, of course.
I first asked, is that what we have to do with us as a little 5-member commission? And any decision spending $100, a claims review, payroll. Or, and it's always has to be all 3 members agree. Or is it because this is creating a TIF area and it's such a big issue, and declared we have to have the 4 members and 3 more?
The statute,
Which one is it?
the statute says any action,
Any action.
any action.
So going forward, any action, we have to have 3 out of 3 if only 3 are sitting here.
That's correct.
Is there not a rule on how,
Or 3 or 4, or 3
Three.
to the bottom, page 3.
The minimum 3 have to agree to whatever the motion is, whatever it is. Okay, that's great.
is there not a rule on how quickly Mr. Walters had to be replaced? Because that would alleviate some of this problem.
There isn't. So there are sometimes there are specific rules about how quickly they are. In this case, we do have a person that has been nominated by the mayor to take Mr. Walters' place. There is just a process that each of the voting commissioners have to go through, which is they have to be bonded and they have to take an oath of office, and that does take some time. We also have run into, with this particular commissioner appointment, she's going to be out of the country in parts for until probably July. So our meeting, we had one more meeting in June scheduled. And so there was a little bit of a scheduling issue there as well, on top of everything else.
So that position will be filled in July.
It will be, it's in the process. So right
It's
now,
like the school board process, you have so many days.
That's
and
right.
you have to work within that.
and there's a provision, and I'm a little wary of speaking of provisions of code, as you might imagine. There's a provision typically where you could serve out, once your term's expired, you can typically serve for an additional 90 days, up to 90 days. So that kind of gives you the time frame in which theoretically appointment could be made at any time, as we have some boards where the governor technically is supposed to appoint positions, and those have just been unfilled.
So this is just taking an unusually long.
I don't know that this is taking an unusually long time. This is actually,
I
We're
replaced
still-
Don Griffin when he became the deputy mayor, and it took as long as going from David to Sarah.
so. But I appreciate the thought. Again, my apologies to the commission.
Just for my notes, what was the Indiana code?
Yeah, of course. It's Indiana Code 36-7-14-8, subsection H, as in hello.
Okay, thank you. Just clarifying, just because I'm just gonna mention, again, especially when we're getting the 5th member seated and she's traveling. Now it's summer, I've got some travel coming up. I explained that to both Christina and to Cindy. And given the clarification that we've gotten now, is that, obviously
Good enough.
interferes with whether this revisiting 22-33. I'm around till the 16th. So that's kind of, or leaving on the 16th, so around to the 15th. But in general, just obviously being able to having the quorum to do business, right? Which in most cases, the resolutions that we have are not quite as weighty and do not require quite the deliberation that we've had in this case. So anyway, I'm just clarifying that the next few weeks, whether it's this specific resolution or other business before the RDC, until we get that 5th member seated and available, we just have to kind of keep an eye on things.
Summer.
So for this particular resolution, we'd probably be asking, and I will rely on Christina to her chagrin, because I always rely on her. To schedule something probably this Friday, Monday, or Tuesday at the very latest, for this, if possible, so we can send out times of availability. It could be, if you want to do it over a lunch break or something like that for a discussion, can do that. If the end of the day works better, we could just do a doodle poll or something.
But it's still a public meeting,
Of course.
and.
So we'll have to notice it. That's why it can only be Friday, because we need 48 hours. So
Right.
we need at least 48 hours to give notice. So
Can we use this time now to find some
At least
possible
one
stuff that, obviously we'll review with Cindy, but just at least 3 of us are here to vet that. That's the
You
only
two
thing.
figure it out, I'm available. anytime.
But I got a question, what we talked about outside the border, and that is because we picked the city, Sarah's not in town, not on the commission yet. So she comes and sits with us. Do we have to have all the staff make all the presentations again? Does the staff come down? and
She
review
can watch the
them?
video.
What?
She can watch the video.
Yeah, we do them. I mean,
Okay,
we,
just asking the
No,
question.
I think it's important, it's a good question, it's just,
We put it on her to watch the video and come up to speed.
yeah, and certainly there may be more questions, because it's back for discussion, but at least in terms of what's already been discussed, fully that would fit her.
No, what if there's a question from Starkey or a Meridian person or whatever, she's fresh to ask.
I can
her.
probably try to do it.
Next time we see.
Okay.
Well, we were planning on, so if it's easier for you all, we did have a meeting scheduled next Monday as a regularly scheduled meeting. If that's on your calendar and that's available, we can do next Monday. Originally, our plan had been, we were gonna cancel that because we were stacking you all up with meetings, kind of back to back, and we like to be kind of nice to you at least, because we actually like you people. So, not just that reason, we want to make sure we're spreading out work, of course. So if it's easier for you to say the regularly scheduled meeting was the 6th, that's a great time and convenient, we can absolutely do that.
Only critical is Cindy can come.
So
It doesn't matter.
ask a procedural question of staff. So do the members, does the approval of a resolution have to be, do the 3 members have to be here in person, or as long as we have a quorum here? Can the third vote come from online, or does it have to be in person?
The third vote can come from online. Let's clarify. So for quorum under the hybrid meeting policy, there has to be a majority of the members physically present in the room. So we need 3 people physically present in the room for quorum. There can be a 4th member or 5th member, whatever it is. Those 2 could potentially participate electronically. Now, the vote, that counts for quorum and it counts for a vote in this regard. And I don't believe that this falls within the excluded items that you can vote for electronically. That TIF creation isn't typically before that. Thank you, Rich. I thank you very much for the confirmation there. So you could have 1 person participating by Zoom and vote, and that could be the 3rd vote. That's fine. But for quorum purposes under the hybrid meeting policy, at least 3 people have to be physically present. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's
3 people here, but a 4th person on Zoom can be a 3rd vote.
That's right.
Thank you.
Or can it be, they can be a seconder also?
They could also be a secretary. Yeah, the full participation in the meeting is fine. There are some prohibited items which include adoption of tax rates and new fees and things like that prohibit you from participating electronically. That's not going to be the case in this regard for the declaratory resolution.
Thank you. Just want to make sure we'll talk to Commissioner Conley.
So to qualify that, are we thinking next Monday?
I'm happy to put it back online, but it's really, can she,
Yeah.
can you, can she be
I-
part of it?
I- I'll do it.
Yeah.
We can probably somebody.
Yeah. The 6th is fine.
But we can't from the-
If we can get confirmation from President Canary, then we'll plan on the 6th and at 5. Does that still work for you all?
Sure.
Yeah.
Do we, I mean, again, that was already originally scheduled, and do we want to have a second option because Canary has had some other conflicts, just to offer some choices to try and get the quorum that we need?
Sure. What time would work for you?
I mean, I guess Friday is kind of a little weird, but,
I'm flexible more or less like Randy,
I'm-
Friday, Monday, or
I'll make myself available
Tuesday.
at any particular time.
It doesn't have to be the end of the afternoon.
It doesn't have to be, it could, like I said, it could be,
12
we're just trying to fit it within your schedules.
sure.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I will show up at 7 in the morning if that's your preferred time. and we will host
with
one.
coffee.
We will, sure, yeah, I will show up with coffee. At this point, donuts, coffee, whatever you want. I think I probably owe you something.
And I have a certain amount of flexibility as well. So again, first choice, the 6th at 5 o'clock is fine. I'm just trying to come up with some other options for President Canary.
Would maybe Friday at noon work?
Yeah, let's offer Friday at noon as a backup option.
Randy?
Hopefully that would be.
So, and I'm just typing this up, Commissioner Conley. So you said Friday at noon, Commissioner?
As a second option.
As a
right?
second option if Monday at 5 is not an option. And yeah, well, I don't know if she's responding to you now. She was trying to get some clarity. We can obviously move forward, it's just the notice.
Sure, well, just as I have it right now.
She probably will test Monday on her calendar.
Yeah, it was only just a case of the last week or so, and hopefully it's still there, so, is it okay if we move forward, or do you want to wait for a response?
May I ask if being in person works for the three of you, in case she tells me that she can only do virtual?
It's fine. Do you want us to wait if you get a response, or should we move forward?
To be honest with you, I don't know. I would say go ahead and adjourn if we need to, or whatever it is, if she.
You can send us an update when you
Yeah.
have it, okay. Anything else before we move for a motion to adjourn? Okay.
Good job, Chair.
Thank you, John. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn, yes.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.